Oneness family, this is Shophar from Full Show Energy Work and Full Show Health, and I'm here to speak to you today about sexual repression. Shout out to the brother Franz Gabriel, who found me through the big homie Rom Wills. So sending much power and love to both of you all. You asked for a video about sexual repression, so here you go. So the first thing that we do, if we're going to talk about sexual repression, let's see what the clinical or the more accepted definition of sexual repression is. Sexual repression is the state in which a person is prevented from expressing their own sexuality, usually because of feelings of guilt or shame about their sexual impulses. So what I want to say on that is that when we talk about our sexual impulses or not being able to express ourselves sexually, many times that's with the lowercase sex that we're talking about. In other words, that involves genitals, that maybe involves the mouth or anus for people, depending on what you are into, right? Maybe some toys or whatever. That for me is a very limited version of what I think of when I say S.E.X, sensual emotional exchange. So what I'm getting at is this, is that if we are not expressing ourselves sensually, that could even be if we're not being creative as we would like to be. If, I have another video on this about sexual repression that I'm posting on my Patreon channel with Queen Kirti, and we talk a little bit about that point. But when we're not even expressing ourselves in a creative way, that is a form of sexual or repression. So I want to first, in order to understand sexual repression, in other words, we have to expand what is it that we're talking about when we talk about S.E.X. So when we do that, any type of thing that represses us sensually, creatively, would fall on the scale somewhere of sexual repression. If you're not being your fully expressed sensual self, in other words, if you're not being your fully creative self, and there's many different ways that can show up that has nothing to do with genitals, giving head or anal sex or anything. It's about who you are as a creative being. And if that's shut down or not at its optimum, then that is a form of sexual repression. Also on the scale is who you are emotionally. Your ability to be able to express yourself. If you're sad, not just putting a happy face on and always saying that you're good, that you're okay. That is a form of sexual repression. Now, I know that's not the norm, and maybe there may be many people who disagree with me. That's what the definition that works for me, given that in the work that I do with the sensual emotional exchange, S.E.X, is that if we're not fully expressed emotional beings, not able to emote, whether it be the quote unquote negative emotions or the positive ones, sometimes we don't want to. You may be in a situation where you have family members or quote unquote friends where you have to dumb down what's going on in your life that is good, the good things that's going on in your life, because you don't want to upset them and make them feel bad. That's sexual repression of sorts. What I mean is this, is that not being able to be your fully expressed emotional self has an effect on your kundalini, has an effect on your creative ability to be who you are meant to be on this planet. Amen. So, and then the X factor is, so when we say sensual emotional exchange, what is the X factor? The X factor is the consciousness or the awareness with the breath. If we're not being able to give breath to the ideas that we want, if we're not able to use the realm of fantasy and imagination, and to even have an idea, sometimes is a form of breaking the bonds of sexual repression. So in other words, what I mean is just to even think differently, and to be able to imagine yourself living differently, doing differently, speaking differently, that of itself can break sexual repression. So what's some common factors about that affect us and cause us to have sexual repression in the first place? A big one is religion. So religion, in many cases, it starts off with good intentions, and it can be something that's very powerful in helping us it can act as like training wheels, if you will, when we're trying to first learn how to ride this bike called life. And but at some point, in my opinion, there comes a point where you need to take those training wheels off. And there are some people who still use religion at a very high level, but most of us, we've outgrown it, and it's time to move and explore life, maybe without that crutch, maybe without those training wheels, because many religions in different ways will, on our sensuality, our emotionality, and our consciousness, our awareness, it will impose and put certain quote unquote guidelines, commandments, thoughts on us that ultimately repress us. And so religion is definitely one of those things for us to take a look at. What is our relationship with religion, and how it affects and informs us what God is and isn't, and what sex is and isn't. And that goes into the next point, which is about guilt and shame. So guilt and shame are two powerful, I would say, what some would call negative emotions that really we can use as fuel, because really it's just energy, right? But we get into this whole negative positive thing, but really they're just energies or feelings that can be converted, that can be alchemized. And how do we do that? Again, we can change our vibe by voice, introspection, breath, and embodiment, and so we can alchemize the guilt and shame. But first we need to take our awareness, our introspection, and even recognize that we have that going on. We have guilt and shame about our genitals, about how we show up sensually or creatively, about how we are emotionally, or about our thoughts and what it is that we're thinking at different times. There's guilt and shame. So one of the powerful things around that is a reframe of sorts. It's like this thing that we are ashamed or guilty about, really get into the key of like, why? So another thing to think of with the word repression is like, let's look at that and actually look at the word itself. We see first off the which a lot of times means to come back to, like I was talking about with religion, same thing. So it's basically like a repressuring, to repress ourselves. You see the word ion at the end, the ION. I say it over and over again because it's important that the ion in science is talking about the exchange of energy, a charged particle. So it's a word that has a lot of power and meaning to it, especially when we think about press or pressure. That's not something that we want to be doing. We don't want to be damming up the energy in the small of our back, in our coccyx area, in our genitals, around our heart or breast or chest area, right? Really anywhere in the body. And so that's one of the things that guilt and shame can do, is that it basically will dam up the energy, so that our thoughts and emotions will dam up the energy and cause us not to be able to have the full circulation of our energy, right? Of our ideas. And we won't be able to see new solutions to things, right? So we don't want to repress, suppress, compress, or oppress our energy. These are all things adding pressure to the system. We know from our heart that our heart needs to have just the right amount of pressure, not too much, not too little, to get the blood to flow throughout the body and for it to return back to the heart, and that beautiful, again, flow of things. So sexual repression are those ideas, those feelings, these things that will cause a clog. We know that we don't want to have a blood clot, right? We don't want to have a thought clot or a feeling clot in our being, things that stop the flow of energy. And so the last thing I'll say about the sexual repression is that it's that which is not dynamic. It's not causing us to evolve. Sensual emotional exchange is evolution. It is revolution. It's revolutionary. And so for us to have any ideas, anything sensually, anything emotionally, or anything with our awareness, our consciousness, that we're breathing into, that is not dynamic, that it is not growthful, that it is not dynamic and spiraling, then it is a form, it is on the scale somewhere of sexual repression. Sexual repression is not always having had some trauma happen to us, or to be beaten or misused and abused, although it can be that too. But a lot of it is more subtle, is what I'm getting at. A lot of sexual repression is a very subtle thing, and it's on us and no one else. It is on us to do the introspection, to introspect, to look inward and see where it is that we are putting that pressure. We are re-pressuring ourselves. The pressure happened maybe in childhood. It maybe happened when you were too little and you didn't understand, and you didn't fully have your masculine clarity online to be able to go through and say that, no, that's an idea that's not good for me. Okay, that happens. So that the pressure, that first press happened. But where it becomes repression, where we're redoing it to ourselves, is because now you're older and you have the power now as a powerful being to stop applying that to yourself. And if we are still doing that, then that is repression. That is us repressuring ourselves. So stop doing that. If you want to know more about how to stop doing that, again, I've always, if you heard me once, I'm giving you can do this on your own. Then you also can join me if you want to some guidance in that as well. So I hope that provides some clarity for you, Brother France, and for anybody else out there who had any questions. If that sometimes, reflections will create more questions. If so, hit down the comments down below. And you can also my email. I'll put my email address on here. And again, y'all, I appreciate y'all coming through. I'm Shophar from Full Show Energy Work and Full Show Health. I have part 2 to this about sexual repression on my Patreon. So if you like the content and you want to, number one, go further and deeper yourself on your journey, and keep cultivating your sensual, sexual, emotional, and consciousness, then you can become a patron on my Patreon channel. Or if you just want to support a brother and help me out on my journey, this is what I do. And I appreciate anyone that's going through and, supporting it in that way. Me and my lady, we also do this energy work together, S.E.X, Sensual Emotional Exchange, with couples. We also do the work with singles. And I have a book, Sacred Orgasmic Living. Again, I appreciate y'all coming through, and keep that S.E.X in your life, y'all. Keep shining, keep evolving, and do so exponentially. Oneness.